Welcome everybody at the Women in Tech Global Forum 2021. Very glad you're all watching. My name is Lieke Lem. I'm CEO of the Future Expertise Center, keynote speaker, TV host, and board member of the Women in Tech the Netherlands. And I'm very proud and honored to be the moderator of today's session, panel session about intersectionality. We'll talk about that in just a while. We have 4 very special, very expert guests. I'll name them and I'll introduce them a bit more later on. First of all, Ozioma Egwonwu, the Chief Strategic Transformation Officer of Burn Bright International. Welcome, Ozioma. So nice to have you here. Also, we have Bianca Tudor. She's founder and CEO at Elite Business Women and Elite Communication. Hi, Bianca. Nice to have you. Thank you so much for your time. We have Reshma Ramachandran, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Senior Vice President and Group Head of Transformation at the Adecco Group. Hi, Reshma. Did I pronounce it correctly?
It is Ramachandran. So it is
Ramachandra.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sorry for that, and I'll try to remember that. And then Isabella Mauro. She is a Director, Head Telecommunications and Digital Communication Industry at the World Economic Forum. Hello, Isabel. Thank you for being here as well. Very nice to have you all. Yeah, we are talking about intersectionality. It's a term introduced by the American Black feminist and professor in law, Kimberly Crenshaw, in 1989. And intersectionality is actually an analytic framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. For example, your gender, your sex, your class, your sexuality, religion, disability, your physical appearance, your height, and all kinds of things. It began as an exploration, actually, about the oppression of Black women in special, but now it is more expanded to include many more aspects of your social identity. So before we start off discussions and things like that, I'd like to one by one introduce our experts a little bit more and ask a first thought of them, personal feeling about term intersectionality, so that we can explore a little bit on the term. And I'd like to start off with Isabella Mauro. Like I said, she is the Director, Head Digital Communications Industry of the World Economic Forum. As a part of her role, she manages the portfolio for the telecom communication and is responsible for managing and implementing the industry's initiatives, including industry transformation, digital inclusion, and impact of technology on the economy and society. And prior to this role, and I find it very interesting to also mention, she was head of the international affairs at the GSMA, where she was responsible for government and institutional relations at a global and regional level. She has a master's degree in European politics and policy from the London School of Economics, and she speaks fluently French, English, Italian, and Spanish, but we'll keep it with English today. Hi, Isabel. Thank you so much for being here. And like I said, I'd first like to have your first thought on the term intersectionality. What's your own view on it? What does it mean for you?
Thank you for the very long introduction. It makes me look maybe older than what I am actually, all these lights behind me. But yeah, I find, so I just, for me, I find the word actually, I personally find the word intersectionality itself very complicated and quite technical, when in fact I think it is something that is so human at the basic and needs to address a problem that is just about humanity, right? But if you ask me what it means, I think it's a mindset. It's something that, personally, I would like to do myself and see everybody apply to everything, our family, our work, our friends, our social network, on the way we approach everything, the way we approach art, right? Like art also needs to be across section, across races, gender, ages, economic backgrounds. So it permeates all aspects of society and of the economy as well. So to me, that's what it is. And if you ask me, what does it mean to me personally? It means 2020. Because the impact of COVID crisis, I think, had a much greater impact on all this section of the intersectionality, if you want, and all the vulnerable population. Because if you were a woman in 2020 and still now, you had to do 3 jobs, right? You had to do your normal job, you had to do your normal at-home job, plus homework, and you had to homeschool your children. Because, you know, from all my friends, I didn't hear that many of the husbands or boyfriends or partners were doing that. So I would say, you know, there was a lot of that. And then, of course, because we know that the Black communities, for instance, in the US, but elsewhere, were much more affected. And economic vulnerable populations in every country was much more you know, impact as well. So for me, COVID and 2020 really brought it to the forefront.
Okay, yeah, to the forefront. Okay, well, thank you very much. It was just a short. We'll expand on it a little bit more later on. But I'd like to go to the next speaker of today, Osioma Egruonwu. And I will ask again, do I pronounce it correctly?
You're doing great, yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, you're an internationally celebrated speaker, strategist, scholar, and an expert in transformational strategy and system change. You are the Chief Strategic Transformation Officer of Burn Bright International. I want to hear more about that later on. Training, coaching, and a lot of those things. You consult on transformational initiatives for a diverse array of clients, from governments, Fortune 100 companies, non-profit organizations, educational institutions. And you have spoken for the United Nations, TEDx, South by Southwest, the Web Summit stages, and top educational institutes. So you've done a lot of things, a lot of media things you've also done. And what's very funny, in 2012, you founded the World Dream Day, and it's celebrated annually on September the 25th. I'd also love to hear more about that. But first, your first reaction to the term intersectionality.
You know, for me, when I first heard that term, it really ignited within me, because hearing the word and understanding the context, it was like, that's it. Because every single one of us do exist at an intersection of multiple identities, right? We have our personal identity and we also have our social identity. So for me, intersectionality brings a level of specificity, and similar to what Isabel was saying, it's also so human, because every single one of us, like I said, I'm a woman, I'm Nigerian born, but I'm also a New Yorker, but I'm also an expat living in Lisbon. And so what I bring to every single moment and how I see the world and what I have to offer the world based off of my intersection really is a unique gift. And so for me, you know, when I think about intersectionality, I think about all of those things. I think about how much of a gift it is to the person who is at, you know, each of us, what we can understand as our own intersection, as well as what we can bring to the work world, right? The workspace, as well as our interpersonal relationships. And so to me, intersectionality truly is a power that can be wielded like a mindset, but it also is one way of understanding ourselves and each other.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Like you said, you're from New York, you know a lot about the States. First, I'll now make this first round, but afterwards we'd like to hear the differences between Europe, of course, and the United States, because I think, especially with not only with gender, but with race, etc., it's a big difference if you're in Europe or America, but maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm not sure.
As well as my Nigerian identity, because that's where I was born. So for me, the core is also as an African woman. And so each of those pieces plays a role in a very powerful way. So glad to share.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more. But first, I go to the next one, and I'll ask you to put on your microphone Reshma Ramachandra. I hope I do it correctly now. It's difficult for me. I apologize. Thank you very much. Great that you're here. We heard you just started your new job as a Senior Vice President at the Adecco Group. So very busy, but still found the time to join us. So very grateful for that. Having grown up in rural India without access to reliable power and clean drinking water and other basic needs, you felt that your purpose to empower people to believe in themselves, to choose, and to enable people to go beyond their self-limiting beliefs. And that has shaped your journey as a business leader over the last 2 decades. Reshma has lived in 13 countries across 3 continents, so she's traveled the world. And you have positioned yourself as successfully an innovative leader in solving complex business problems and enabling reinventing organizations and creating environments of respect, inclusion, and belongingness. Belongingness is a very important term if I read about you on the internet, so I'd like to hear more about that later on. Building cultures that embrace lifelong learning and reinvention, including programs to upskill and reskill people to meet the future needs. In the several roles that you've held, you were responsible for driving change, leading digital transformation, leveraging the power of data and innovative business models. Your expertise in leadership and business transformations has been instrumental in unlocking several new streams of revenue by addressing the unarticulated needs of the customer. So you have a big track record there, Reshma. We'll talk a little bit later about that belongingness, but maybe even now you can address it while giving your first reaction to the term intersectionality.
So I think, both intersectionality and the more commonly used diversity and inclusion, both of these are terms which I started exploring when I moved out of a position of privilege to more of a position of discrimination. So, and intersectionality was something that I personally looked up around 2014, 2015, my time in Europe. And 2015 is when the word also got to the Oxford Dictionary, right? And as both Isabel and Oshioma have said, I think it's more about where do our experiences intersect, and what does that actually intersection mean both for us, so for me personally, and what does that intersection mean for people around me. And I think it's very powerful. It's very powerful, and because it is powerful, I think it's complicated. So it needs to be seen from both angles, from the point of view of the person who has that intersection of several experiences, several factors, right? Like how we grew up, the race, gender, so many things, socioeconomic conditions. And on the other side, it also means how do you make use of that value that the person brings through that intersection.
Yeah. That's clear. Well, thank you very much for this first view on that. I'll ask that later on, but I want all of you to think about it. Can it also be a big chance to have multiple levels of that identity on that intersection? Because it's not only a threat by discrimination, but it can also be a chance to know what's going on, etc. But before we dive into that, I want to go to our last expert of today, Bianca Tudor. Welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time and being here. Bianca is founder and CEO, Elite Business Women and Elite Communication, Senator World Business Angels Investment Forum. And she wants every girl to know that her voice can change the world. Bianca Tudor, a woman entrepreneur supporting women entrepreneurs, CSR addict, founder of many entrepreneurial projects such as the Elite Business Women and EBW Investment Fund. At Elite Business Women, they believe that sharing economy and empowering women is important. It's a network of women entrepreneurs, 11,000 from Romania, the UK, Portugal, Italy, and expanding now by launching the Elite Business Club. Is that correct, Bianca?
Yes.
Are you expanding now?
We are expanding, and it is amazing. And with COVID-19, it was also a great opportunity for me to scale up online. So thank you so much for the introduction.
No, thank you. Do you have a first view on the subject?
Yes. First of all, I'm really happy to be here and to listen all these amazing speakers. In my point of view, it is always difficult to embrace the fact that we are so different in race, in gender, in religion or sexual orientation, in a world in which all we need is the feeling of being accepted and loved. If you remember when you see a small child, when she is born, he only wants to be accepted and loved by his mother. So this is what we want as humans, as social beings. On the other hand, what we need is basic education and training on the positive results we have when we embrace equality, diversity, intersectionality, and other examples like that. And as well, I would really love to have more examples and role models from discriminated categories, people of color, disabled individuals, young women, elderly people, or LGBTQ people. So this is my takeaways on this topic.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. That was a short introduction of all the four speakers on the subject. Now we try to see if we can get a little discussion going. And I'd like to start off with Oshioma, because you say that intersectionality is not necessarily about discrimination. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because with Burn Bright, you're focusing on the transformational strategies, and I'd like to hear from you what you do in some of the key transformational opportunities to embrace that intersectionality in the tech mainly.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I say that intersectionality is more than just discrimination, I think, we draw from kind of approaches that are kind of rooted in appreciative inquiry, right? Which is that if all we're going to inquire into is is deficit, we're going to get more of deficit, right? And so if we are only looking at intersectionality from the frame of discrimination as opposed to the larger context of whether it's workplace culture, whether it's about, inclusion or belonging or all these other concepts. It expands the meaning. And so it's not to say that it's not about discrimination. Of course, it's rooted in that. If anyone has ever seen any of the amazing talks by Kimberly Crenshaw, we know that it was rooted in the overlapping discriminations, right, that a Black female faced, and the awareness that many Black women felt racism within the feminist movement, as well as sexism in the civil rights movement. And so that overlapping awareness creates a certain category of experience. Now, from that category of experience, if we take it into the world of tech and we talk about the nature of whether it's product development, whether it's about, workplace culture, the intersectionality and the awareness of that impacts everything from how we design user experiences and user journeys, to how we develop products and services and offerings, to what kind of culture we experience in the world of tech. And with that is the opportunity to actually create environments where all of us feel like we are included, like we belong, where we can create our best and brightest work. And so, the work, when you talk about the work that I've done, it runs the gamut, not just obviously in the world of tech, but everything from actually doing longitudinal studies, as it relates to understanding, the feelings and the opportunities of what can be done in of diversity and inclusion. It runs everything from even having traveled in America to the Deep South and done racial healing dialogues and conversations to understand how certain communities can actually heal from racial pain and suffering and hurt, deeply entrenched systems and structures. And so it also, can run the space of personal development and how women leaders, whether they're Black leaders, white leaders, regardless, how women leaders can actually be a stand for transformation, not just because they have experienced it personally, but also on the behalf of others. So it's really about, how do we transform and create the world and the cultures and the communities and the organizations that we know is possible. And so that's kind of the place that I come from it.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because I, in all my privilege, I'm white. I'm a woman, of course, but I'm white. I'm straight. I'm from a good family. I have studied. And when I was asked to do this panel, I was like, am I the right person in place? Because I have never experienced the true depth of those problems, I'll call them. So I was kind of surprised, but I find it very funny that you say it's especially also for people who do not stand on that intersection themselves to take that. So
and
I'm
part of it,
actually that I'm here now to learn.
And part of that is the reality that, like, I will never know what it's like to be you. You will never truly know what it's like to be me. But if you can elevate your awareness and your understanding, you can be an ally, you can be a collaborator in dismantling the systems that hold us back. And I think that in the world today, all of us are going to have to be, able to open our hearts and our minds to align with a woman in India who has her challenges, or a woman in Portugal who has her challenges, regardless. And I think that's what's really the opportunity, understanding intersectionality and truly being able to step into the space of empathy, what I call empathy and inclusion, because those two frames hold so much.
Yeah, although I do also believe that it's not only, I feel a lot of empathy, and I always think that I'm not a racist, but there's so much intrinsic in my beliefs and in the way I see things. I don't know if you girls watch the series on Netflix, Bridgerton.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's a series, very romantic, and the main character is Black. And for me, that was, well, not a shock, but it was different. It surprised me in that sense, because it was staged in a time where there weren't Black in that position. So it's also seeing the examples over and over again to be aware that it's normal. You understand what I'm saying, Osioma?
I have an example here, if you allow me. In Australia, in a study, white people were cast in a psychology test judging people of color. And when they received the results, they were really amazed by the fact that they have some judgment about these people on color. So there are some social stereotypes we have, and we are not so aware about that.
Yeah, it's unawareness. Do you relate to that, Osioma? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I mean, what Bianca's really speaking about is unconscious bias, right? And how do we make unconscious bias more conscious? And then how do we actually create systems, structures, collaborations to dismantle what gets created? Because again, there's unconscious bias, and then there is truly conscious bias, and we need to acknowledge that there is conscious bias, and it is playing a role. So for me, I think the difference is that when you see a white person playing a black role, especially again, for the context of America, it's like, okay, a white person can play anything. But when you see another person playing, it's like, wait a minute, that person's not necessarily supposed to play that. And I'm looking forward to all of us evolving and emerging into an awareness where we can have more of that fluidity around what is possible for a woman, right? It's not just about ethnicity. We have the same thing happening in terms of a woman can't do this, a woman can't do that, this gender can't, this sexual orientation can't do this and that. So it's really about being able to have it so that when you see that the next time in like a show like Bridgerton, you may be like, oh, I didn't expect that, but immediately then another awareness rises to be able to say, wow, how amazing is that? And yes, too, that can be so.
I'm sorry for the stupid example, but it was the only thing that came up in my mind because I was so confronted with my own, like you said, unconscious bias in that sense. I was like, okay. Reshma, I want to go back to you because you spoke, like I said, a lot about that belongingness. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean with that and how important is that?
I think, when we talk about intersectionality, and for me, intersectionality, is more about experiences, right? So one is like what things we are born with, the gender, the race, the nationality. There is also a lot of experiences that we gain. And this is what truly creates those intersections. And when I talk about belongingness, it's always looked at from the point of view of the person who has the privilege. So, when you just made the a comment as well, Like, where you say, I don't think I'm racist. And I don't think you're racist. I don't think you think of anyone as lower than you or, that other person doesn't deserve what you deserve. But I don't think it is about being from your point of view. I think it's also from the point of view of the person who has never experienced something like that, right? So for me, when I migrated to Europe, what I see through my eyes is very different from what someone who grew up here has seen through their eyes. So it's not necessarily about saying a person who is a privilege. So I don't speak the local language. I'm a woman in tech. I'm a woman of color. So all of this actually plays a role, not necessarily from a discrimination point of view, but it's also a question of when I look around, I don't see anyone like me. So do I feel belong? I belong. I don't. And sadly, I don't. So if I don't feel I belong, I can't bring my best self to work. I can't use my experiences that are so powerful to create something that is actually useful for the world, that is actually useful to our customers, right? So for me, the question has always been about how do you actually make a person in the organization, in the society, that they feel belong. It's not about me. So when I'm on this side, it's never, as a leader, it's never about me. And I tell others, my peers, my people around me, it's never about us. It's about acknowledging that we don't, and as Oshima very rightly said, I can never be someone else. And someone else can never be me. But it's acknowledging the fact that, everyone has different experiences. And because of that, they actually see the world in a different way that we see. So how do we give them the confidence? How do we give them that safety net, psychological safety, to say that it doesn't matter which way I see the world, what is the lens that I use, but I can bring my whole self to work, which would then unlock everything, all of my potential. So I focus a lot on the belongingness, and I think it's very powerful, which is the only thing that can lead to the next level. When we talk about inclusion, for example, that's the only thing that can lead to that. I need to feel belong. It's not about whether you include me or not. I need to feel at home.
But that sounds, first of all, I'm being the advocate of the devil, of course. It sounds a little bit easy, and it also sounds a little bit like you put it on yourself only because you need your environment to belong, right? I mean, it's how you feel. But if I don't give you any space, if I don't give you any opportunity, just because of your name, of your gender, or your whatever, then you can feel belonging. But I mean,
You can't, and I think this is two-way, right? So it's not, I don't say I put everything on me or the individual, but I think this both ways. So it's not really a question of how I bring myself to the society or to the world, but I also think it's a question of how the society or the organization itself. So where organizations where there is more awareness, there is a more sense of belongingness. Organizations which are less aware, and this is probably got to do with unconscious bias and some amount of conscious bias, where you say, and I use this example a lot, where you say, as a woman, how can she be the head of engineering, or how can she lead technology? How can she lead something in digital, which is very tech? I think this is unconscious bias, right? You've never seen someone in that position doesn't mean that she cannot do it. Yeah. So I think it's both ways. So it's not, I don't think the onus rests only on one side. I would say it is both. But if you don't have that sense of belongingness, especially for the individual, I don't think you can bring the power of all your experiences to a fruitful result.
Okay, it's very powerful. I love really the way you say that. Thank you very much. Bianca, wanted to take you in the conversation. Do you have any comments on what was just being said by Oshioma and Reshma?
Well, I love their opinions, and I think it's really great that we have diversity in the panel. First of all, let's say as an example, I've always been really young. I started my career at 19 years old, and I was the youngest in the first company in which I had my first job in a bank. And then at 23, I was a team leader. At 26, I started my own business and so on. So I had always this mindset that I had to do things, and people always told me that it is not possible, that I'm too young, that I'm a woman, I'm a young woman, in a world of men. So we'll get that. We will receive a lot of, let's say, social stereotypes in our way. But if they tell you it is impossible, remember that it is impossible for them and not for you. So this is my takeaway in my 14 years of career. And I just wanted to say that to all the women who are out there, who are young, they are ambitious, they are determined. It is possible. And if you know that you can, and even though you might think you can't, just try. Just go there and do whatever you think you want to do. And you find amazing people, and I will suggest you will be part of good networks of women, such as the Women in Tech Global Movement and other organizations.
Yeah, because we need to support each other, and that's the lucky thing. Age is one of those identities, but that's, I think, the only one that will resolve with time by itself. Eventually, you will not be a young woman anymore.
I will always be the youngest wherever I go.
But then again, there will always be those young women, of course, who encounter the same problems. So I'd like to ask you, Isabel, you're working with the World Economic Forum to educate girls and to how do you say, make that gap a little less broad. Do you think it's important to educate them in tech? Do you see special ways to do that?
Yeah, I think it's very important, but it's not the sort of answer to the solution, if you want, to everything. I think it is important, and it's a big part of the solution because I think it will help eliminate the stigma, right? That an engineer has to be a male, that a mathematician has to be a male, or we are used to that, right? Or that's coding is just for male, and I think that in itself will give better access to technology, but to the workforce at large. Because today, when you work in retail, in healthcare, or in banking, on any other sector, you need access. You need an education in technology. You need to be able to, even just to work in administration, be an admin in a company, you will need to have had computer skills, right, to do that job. So I think that is critical, that from a very early stage, you need to give access to technology, and that schools in particular should have access to technology from a very early on stage. And had it been happening much earlier, we wouldn't have had the 250 million of kids that are out of school at the moment that don't have access to education. Because through COVID, if you're not online, if you don't have a laptop at home or a tablet, you cannot go, you cannot be educated. So I think this has to really become an integral part of the education. the access. So it's not just the study in STEM, it's access to technology in school from a very early stage, I think is really critical. And it's also getting critical because it will give access to girls as well as boys, to any background, whatever background you are in that school, then you will have access and you will be given the same opportunities. So I think that is really critical. And I think one of the other things as well that we often think, it's, if you think of that, there are 40% of the girls and women that still live in countries that have failed on gender equality and that are still failing on gender equality. And so that is also an enormous problem we have to address from all angles. And if tech can help, in bringing awareness of that, just by collecting the data, right, of what is really the true situation on the ground, I think that already in itself is a very powerful tool to make that number go down and provide more access. So definitely for me, and intersectionality, you see, I really have problems saying the word. It's, for a French person, it's too complicated. It's really much more than this, just the STEM studies. It permeates along to everything.
Okay, that's clear. Well, you're speaking about people not having access to all those things. I'm going back to you now, because you said yourself in your biography that you grew up in a rural area without a lot of access to even water or electricity. Could you share a little bit about your personal story and how you got out of that place and into the world and into tech? What helped you?
So the tech is the easy part. So you grew up in rural India. What you actually want, your ambition is to actually have financial independence. And the only way you can have financial independence is to have a good job. And the only way you can have a good job is to basically have a STEM education. So the tech part was easy. So I got into engineering. How my journey has taken or unfolded is just a curiosity, right? So when I grew up, I just know what I didn't know. So if you would have told me about Switzerland, I had no idea where on map Switzerland was. I just didn't know. So what happens with growing up like that, either you actually grow up extremely ignorant, you don't know what you don't know, and you remain like that. And I think a lot of people choose that path. Or you grow up like someone like me who actually wants to know more. So you're never happy with anything that you learn. You just want to learn more. So whether it's about experiences, so this is the reason I have lived in 13 countries. So you move because you get to experience a culture. You actually have moved different industries, although everything has been tech, because you want to learn more. So I think it just develops a deep sense of purpose, that's one, but also a sense of that hunger, you just want to learn more. So one of the things that is I'm very passionate, and this has nothing to do with just women, but I would just say people who do not have access to that kind of knowledge, show them what the world looks like, show them what good looks like. This just helps those, the girls, the kids in the schools to aspire for something. So, one of the things that I actually like is also, if you can't see her, you can't be her. So if you don't see role models, you can't aspire for that. And I grew up like that. I didn't have anyone who was a female engineer, a woman engineer who actually managed a leadership role. So a lot of women I knew had jobs, of course, but it's jobs to give you the financial independence, not the career, right? So I also made a transition from being financially independent with a job to how you convert a job into a career. And now I would say for the last 5 years at least, my career has turned into purpose. And this is also the reason why I have changed my job from a very tech engineering environment to ECHO, which is very people oriented. So what we actually stand for is to make the future work for everyone. And when I say everyone, literally everyone. So people with disabilities, women, minorities, no matter what your sexual orientation is, anything. So just about making future work for everyone. So for me, it has been a complete shift from a job to job for financial independence to a career, to career becoming a true purpose. And I think my next level would be true calling. So yeah. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, well, you're on the road and you're getting there. Now I ask Bianca because you're from the network. Is it important that we support each other, and how can we do that? Do you have any examples of your organization where you say we can indeed support the ones who are trying to get there and give them role models? Because I hear that with all of you, role models are important.
I love the question, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors in my life. I've been looking for them. It's not like they came to me and said, I want to mentor you. I've been always passionate to learn from people who are doing great things. And my first mentor was a man. He still is, Donovan from Noble Manhattan Code. And I remember coming to him and saying, I want to be like you. And I was 21. And he said, why do you want to be like me? Well, because I know that I have the power to do something great. And this is how it started. So I think mentorship is really important from two perspectives. The first one is like you need guidance. When you start a journey, it's like you see nothing. And you need someone who is going to say that, I reached the final destination, so you can as well. And second, because that mentor already brought some experience. He had experience and he opened up doors before you. So I suggest you go and start everything on your own. Just ask someone who already done the challenges he or she faced and the lessons he or she had after all the experience. So mentorship is really important. Another thing important as well is collaboration, and this is what made EBW to stand up as an organization started from zero. I started a business with the aim to create a new generation of women entrepreneurs and career women and women who would involve in the community and create something not only for them but for the community as well. When we invest in women, they invest back 90% into the community. So a financially independent woman will go and she will be a volunteer in her community. She will be involved in her family. She will have more, let's say, financial means to educate her children. So it's not a feminist movement. When I say EBW and it's about women, a lot of men ask me, are you a feminist? No, I think that I'm advocating for equal rights for people. And women are people as well. It's not, they're not women and people, we are all people. And I've seen in my life the impact education and access to financing had brought in my life, the means that I had. I was the first woman having a university degree in my family. After that, my mother took her university degree at 45 years old and started a business at 48. And now she's doing great. But I've seen what role models can do in your life. And I'm really happy that after this experience, I said, okay, I think this is what we need. We need more real people go out there, starting from zero, sitting and coming back with the lessons and know-how and exchange of good practices.
Wow, that's really so inspiring, especially that it doesn't matter how old you are in the end. It's
Yes.
you want to, and if you're able to. Osioma, looking at your organization, how do you support other women? Where do you put the emphasis? Are there special projects you want to tell about?
Yeah, there's a lot of, so many different ways. So the way that my organization is kind of structured is, we do quite a bit in terms of like consulting at different types of initiatives, whether it's sustainability or diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's based off of because of my skill set and what I've been able to do. But then in addition to that, there's these personal, we call transformational development programs. And so everything from Rise and Shine, which is like one of my favorite programs to lead because it really focuses on 5 core capacities for women, which is, confidence, right? Compassion, connection, courage, and clarity. First and foremost, clarity, because I feel like those to me are the 5 core capacities that when women, especially women in leadership, when they have that, they are truly able to rise and shine. And so that was actually the talk when I first began speaking at the CSW at the United Nations, the CSW breakout session. That was the first talk that I gave, was about what are the capacities that will support women in really rising and shining. And so I do an entire transformation program, personal, individual, as well as group coaching around that particular modality. But I don't want to make this a laundry list of the programs and services I do. I think for me, what we've been hearing about in terms of mentorship is so important. You know what I mean? And I would say whether it's within my organization or outside, I'm always big on mentoring young people, whether they're girls or boys. I just recently did a 3-month mentoring with a young man in India who wants to learn how to be a strategist, and he would never, my love Ravi, he would never be able to be an agency strategist, but through mentoring with me and me supporting his journey, he was able to learn how to rise in certain ways. I've done that with women as well. So I always feel that it's exactly it. If I can't see it, I can't be it. And the thing about it too, I would say, is that there's a different level of mentoring where you're just doing the base level. And what we need are like strong, passionate mentors who really believe in the possibility of those we're mentoring, so that it's not just like a rote kind of like we're just doing it just to say we did it, but we are truly taking a stake in someone's development. It's very similar to the way we do incubators and accelerators, right? Where you're taking a stake in that person or that entity's future, right? The founder in the future. I really feel passionate about that when we take people on, we really are committed to their rise and committed to their development. And so it gives me great joy to be able to have done that throughout my career. From the time when I had my own business, but even when I was in the agency world as a vice president of strategy, I always had mentees that I would coach and support. And so, especially women.
Did you have your own mentor? Do you have some mentor or a role model that made a big impression on you?
Oh, me. Oh my God. I've been so blessed with mentors. I would say I don't know if you know this woman named Dr. Jean Houston. She's one of the co-founders of the Human Potential Movement, and she's in her 80s. But for many years, when I was actually running an organization called Rising Women, Rising World, I was the chief operation officer, and it was a consortium of really high power women like Dr. Scylla Elworthy, Dr. Jean Houston, and Dr. Ramamani. So it was an Indian woman, a British woman, an American woman coming together to create this global women's organization, and I was the COO. And they mentored me. We had 14 different women from all over the world. So to me, I've had the mentorship of a women's circle as well as specific mentorship from Dr. Jean Houston that has made such a huge difference in my development, because she specialized in human potential. And so I was able to rise in the work that I do in the world by someone who in the 60s and 70s and beyond has been doing this level of work. So it's been such a gift.
I find it very funny that you say it was kind of like a circle, because then you're like back at the networking from Bianca. It actually, I would almost say, it takes a village to raise a good woman. Not a child.
It does, and I think that's really right, is having more and more women stepping forward, and also women realizing I don't have to just have one mentor. There's different women who have different capacities that I can leverage and I can learn from. And in addition to that, sometimes the mentors are the ones you read in books, ones you watch on video. You don't even ever meet them, but which is, I say this because I'm trying to get more women to engage in thought leadership, and not just working, but putting out their articles, putting out their videos, because that is a form of mentorship. It's not always just about taking a young woman on or anyone on. Sometimes it's about you giving your gifts to the world, and that itself becomes the way in which we are supporting the evolution of the world that we believe in, So just wanted to kind of underscore that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, that's good to see what we can do for each other in the world on a more personal basis, a more network basis with what Bianca said, or our own vision to it, like Reshma said. But then, Isabel, you're working with the World Economic Forum, so you're doing it in a global scale, not personally mentoring persons, but trying to see if you can create opportunities on a larger scale. Actually, you have the Edison program. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that exactly tries to do with the utilization of the people?
Sure. Yeah, we launched this. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
The line is okay. We launched this initiative called the Edison Alliance 2 weeks ago during the Davos week, which was of course virtual this year, and it's really, the scope is really to accelerate digital inclusion. And the vision is to ensure that every person can affordably participate in the digital economy. And we've been at this I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I would say that the last 10 years at least have been dedicated to bridging the digital divide. And yet we still have 3.7 billion people out there, right, that do not have access. They have access, but they're not online. And of course, the COVID crisis, again, what it brought to light, it really exacerbated the digital divide, because you saw that, like this 3.7 billion could not work, could not study from home, could not have access to healthcare, could not even speak to their families or friends, or, And for the first time, what we saw, the reason why, there was really a sense of urgency is that when we used to talk about the digital divide, it was always, you would think of sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and all of a sudden, I live in the heart of Manhattan. There were kids here that could not be educated. There still are children that cannot be educated. There are, that there are so many people, I think it was brought to the fore even in Europe and in the US, that these digital deserts, as we call them, are everywhere, and not just, in regions where we have maybe the prejudices of expecting them. So really, for us, the goal here is really to build a global movement to mobilize leaders from all sectors. So it's not just the ICT, it's healthcare, it's, in education, in finance, in energy, really bring them together and see how we can critically advance and put, our where our words are, where our mouth is at the moment, and really provide access urgently, because nobody's going to go back to 100% face-to-face life and world. We know that we are moving to an increasingly hybrid world, and that's sort of one of the legacy, I guess, that COVID will leave behind with us. And the urgency is really, time is now, to do this. And I think one of the power here is that once you really tackle how the use of technology can really help connect and accelerate digital access to healthcare, where you still have 2 billion people that do not have access to healthcare. So if technology can help even half of these people access healthcare, it's already something. Same thing for the 250 kids that I was saying million that don't have access to school, or the 1.7 billion that don't have access to a bank account or financial services. So when you start putting all this together, there is really a power. And in terms of intersectionality here, where it comes into force, because if you look at all these billions of people that I've mentioned that don't have access to healthcare or finance, usually it is women. The majority will be women. The majority will be, non-white people, and the majority will be in regions that are the most affected, and of course the most economically deprived. So I think this initiative is really, it's very close to my heart, and I'm really glad that we could bring it to the forum, because this is really about inclusion, and inclusion across all these segments.
Because we could fairly say that not being digital widens the gap, because if you're already more poor or more backwards, then without getting that education or that access to healthcare or whatever will put you further. What do you have, like a strict how do you say that in English? When would you say that somebody is connected? Do they have to have one laptop in their house, or do they have to have access, like say in a library or a public space? Because, like, for instance, I have 4 children, and even I got a letter from school that they should all have their own laptop, and I'm wealthy, but they didn't all have their own laptop to have schooling, and they should all be in a separate room. So now with COVID, even for people who are privileged, it's difficult. But when would you say that a child has access to digital school?
So it's not just a child; it's everywhere. Like and I think that's what the UN are trying to refine. What means meaningful connectivity? What is the definition of meaningful connectivity? And it varies so much from region to region. If you're in a village maybe in a country, I don't know, in a least developed country, even just the power of putting a mobile phone in the hands of someone in a village can already tremendously change their life. If you are in a more privileged background and you have 4 children at home, in the US, in Europe, or elsewhere, maybe it's a different act, right? It's, do you need 4 laptops? And even if you do, do you have the means to afford the broadband access to that capacity? Because you will have to upscale your broadband package, right, every month if you want to have 2 parents working from home and 4 children at home. But so it really depends on the circumstances, on geographies, on the economies of the countries, what it is. But in schools, I would say a little bit what I was saying before. It's making sure that it's not maybe every child that has a laptop, but that every class at least has a computer to be able to use and start with skills, and then take it from there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, the time is running fast again. We have some issues left that I really would like to discuss with all of you, but I'd like to make it a more vivid discussion that everybody can just, say anything they want. I would say raise your hand or something, and then we'll see you and we'll put you in because I'd like to know your opinion about the use of words. How important are words? So there are always a lot of discussion, like should you say he or she, or should it be an it, or from bathroom to really the words that you use. How important is that? I start with you, Oshioma, but if anybody feels that they have something to say, raise your hands. Oh, Reshma. Oshioma? Yeah. Okay.
I thought I wanted to go first because this relates to my own bias. So, last year during COVID, I had a nanny to help me at home, and she couldn't come anymore. So I said I was home, so I said, all that I need is cleaning lady. So I just need someone to come and help me with cleaning. And there is an online site that you can advertise, and I'm looking through this when I have a son, and we talk a lot about bias and use of words. And he came, sat next to me and said, Mama, are you not biased? You're looking for a cleaning lady, not a cleaning person. Right? And I think it was a very powerful moment for me when you think that you are not, you are aware of biases, or you are advocating for removing unconscious bias, and you're actually, making an impact at an organization level, at a social level, but in your own homes, you're still biased about how you look at certain roles, just because and in German, it's actually, anywhere you look at it, it's always puts Frau. So Frau is the lady, right? So it's always lady. So I think words are extremely powerful because it's not about our own biases. It's about how or how not we are passing on our biases to the next generation.
Yeah, you keep them going by using those words, I think. Anybody who recognizes this wants to comment on that, Isabel? Yeah.
Yeah, totally of that as well. And just one thing, maybe a comment I want to say as well. And I hope, again, because that points to the points of the power of words. For me, living now in the US, and in particular this year with the Black Lives Matters and everything happened the use of words that we even use to describe certain races or I have found it difficult to find an evolution of what is correct and what is not, and what is offensive and what is no longer offensive, and how words shift. So I think there is so much education to be done there, because I have been very conscious, in particular, I come from France, where we are probably the most offensive country in the world. So I have an appalling track record. We are rude, and being in the US, where you have to be so careful about the words you use, to me has been a great lesson on how being, more careful, how I use the words, how to describe things, to describe people, and it's a constant learning curve. And so, yeah, just to emphasize, I couldn't agree more how the power of words is important, and how there is so much we need to educate ourselves on what is right or not.
Okay, Ocean.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Shadrin said, and also what Isabel said, and also just kind of pointing to the fact that it's also about, right, we're talking words, but we're really talking about culture. And culture is fluid, and how we use words and representations are very fluid. And, there was a time when it was Negro in America, then it was African American, and now it's Black, and it was a small b, but people wanted a big B, and it's going to be like that. And so for me, I would advocate being able to embrace how culture and words and the meanings are constantly evolving. But then you also have, ways in which people feel that how do certain words or certain acronyms speak to solidarity? And then also, how do they obfuscate and kind of gloss over the issue? So you have things like BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color, all grouped together. And then there's Black people who still feel that that's actually getting away from issues that are very much rooted in Blackness. POC, people of color. But wait, what about the issues that are going on there? Diversity, but we're really talking more about women than we're talking about, ethnicity. And so I think for me, more than just about the nature of words, it's about how are we wielding these words, and in what situation are they being used to empower and to support the dismantling? And in other ways, are they used to continue to keep the status quo in place? And I think that they can be doing both. So that's important to pay attention to, how they're being used and what purposes they serve in their usage.
Yeah, I understand, because in some way you could also use it as a disguise for the real problems. Like we have people who solicitate with a different name so that they will be easier called for a conversation. But in fact, they're lying about their identity. I have a friend who gives all their children the name of the opposite sex. So if she has a girl, she gives it a boy's name. And I kind of like feel, are we moving too far with that? Are we not, like you said, disguising the real problem? The problem is not the names. The problem is that you treat people differently if they have a certain name. Maybe that's not exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, for example, right, when we talk about diversity, even when people talk about diversity of thought, so we're going to use diversity to talk about diversity of thought, but then from a social identity perspective, there's not actual real, maybe gender diversity, or there's not real ethnic diversity. And so the same word being used in ways that can actually not support the true shifts that need to be made. So it's about how are we wielding and using it. But I know Bianca wants to build on this.
Yeah, I will agree with Bianca.
Thank you so much. I was thinking while you were talking about the fact that there will always be unconscious bias. We will always see things differently. This is why we have so many opinions, and we have diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality. What I think it would be important is that we teach girls and boys as well to know who they are, not to be hurt by people's opinions about them. Because, when a young girl is told that, maybe she's not tall, or maybe she's not slim, or she's, I don't know, she has the nose, I don't know in what way, she will be hurt, and she will not have confidence to go out there and to be whoever she wants to be. But what we need to do is to educate boys and girls to know who they are, and the fact that it doesn't matter your skin color, your hair, I don't know, your height, your whatever. It's about know who you are, and the fact that you are incredibly amazing as you are. And no matter if you are maybe an individual who has health issues, I have a lot of people around me who maybe they are not able to do sports, but they still do something little in their home, in their houses. So just to educate more about the fact that it's not what people see, it's about what you see in you and what you can build.
We're almost at the end of this panel session. I'd like to give all of you an opportunity to say one more thing to the audience directly, maybe a good advice or a lesson, but I'd like to ask you to keep it as short as possible because we're kind of running out of time, but I want to give each of you the opportunity to say. So Reshma, if I may start with you, is that okay?
I just have one thing for all the women who are watching this, be the role model that you wished you had.
Thank you very much. Bianca.
Wow, it's hard, but I would say that everyone has the right to build a prosperous life. So no matter where you are, just go for it. You have one opportunity, you can.
Okay, thank you. Oshoma.
Yeah, I would say embrace your own intersections as well as create opportunities for others.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Isabel.
Well, I would say to every girl out there, aspire to be in a panel like this in 5 years' time to discuss something else than intersectionality or gender, but to discuss tech, the future of finance, the future of energy, so that we are, truly embracing gender across everything.
Thank you very much. And I truly do hope that. And I hope that this panel for the Women in Tech Global Forum will contribute to that. And I hope we reach a lot of girls, women, people, and that the world will change for the better. Thank you very much for your contribution to that goal. Thank you very much, ladies. And thank you, watchers. And have fun at the rest of the Global Forum.